the inception of Starbucks. Coffee, coffee, coffee is a constant mantra that runs through many of our minds at odd times during the day. Whether you need it to help you stay up all night cramming for an exam or to help get through a tiring day, coffee is a huge part of our lives. Coffee is a $100 billion global industry producing over 2.25 billion cups of various style coffee on an average day. All this consumption has made coffee the second most traded commodity in the world, after oil of course. And one chain that is undeniably the most well-known coffee joint in the world is Starbucks. Whether you love this coffee chain or happen to think they make the worst drip coffee imaginable, one thing's for sure, you can always find a Starbucks when you need a jolt of caffeine. How this coffee chain came to be the global mammoth it is today is actually quite an interesting story. It all starts like this. After the Second World War, the US was the most powerful country. They essentially had everything but one. They couldn't make a really good cup of coffee. But this wouldn't be the case for long, for on the West Coast there was a man named Alfred Peet, who made his living by roasting coffee beans and selling them. Coffee is in Alfred's DNA. His father was a Dutch trader importing beans from Indonesia and Caribbean. He desperately wanted to teach Americans that they too could make amazing coffee, if only they realized that the beans were meant to be roasted, not grounded. While he couldn't teach all of America, he did teach two young men who took his lesson to heart. It was in 1967 in California, where Pete's unique roasted goodness inspired two men, Jerry Baldwin, an English teacher, and Gordon Boker, a writer, to start selling high-quality coffee beans. As a product of this love came the first ever Starbucks coffee, tea, and spice, in a small store in Seattle's Pike Place market in the year 1971, earning its name from Chief Mate Starbuck, a fellow coffee lover in Moby Dick. The store was designed to look slightly nautical, a long wall with wooden shelves displaying 30 different kinds of coffee, all supplied by Alfred Peet, who also taught the founders his style of roasting beans. The shop only sold coffee beans and the best home coffee machines, with occasional samples served in porcelain cups. From the start, Starbucks was bucking the odds. Seattle was experiencing an economic downturn called the Boeing Bust, where 62,000 workers were fired. Yet Starbucks was a hit that caught Seattle's eyes. People who enjoyed savoring their coffee at home, coffee that warmed them down to their souls, especially on gloomy days, were automatically drawn to Starbucks, the only place in town that offered quality coffee. In the year 1981, Starbucks expanded to 4 stores in the Seattle area. It wasn't a lot, but it's enough to catch the attention of those who viewed coffee as a kind of religion. One such person was Howard Schultz. Howard was born and raised in New York. He was about to come around and revolutionize the coffee industry. He first heard the name Starbucks after it came up as an unusual activity in company records. You see, he worked as VP in Hammerplast, a company that sold high-end European kitchen appliances, and Starbucks had just placed an abnormally large order for coffee makers, even larger than Macy's. Naturally, this piqued his curiosity, leading him down to the small store in Seattle. Once there, he was taken aback not only by its size, but the fact that they roasted coffee beans. Didn't they know that grounds came from a can, not a bean? He approached the man behind the counter in inquiry and got a sample of Sumatra coffee. One sip is all it took. He couldn't believe that the coffee he had his whole life back was swill compared to this strong and earthy concoction. The man continued to explain that no customer leaves with just the roasted beans, but also with a coffee maker. Everything made sense. This was why the orders were so big. This entire experience led him to the office of the founders. There, Baldwin explained why Starbucks stands out from the rest. The finest beans can withstand the heat. The darker you roast them, the more flavor you get. Coffee is simple, just water and ground beans. But when you have the perfect beans, it becomes one of the world's special pleasures. Baldwin's obsession made Schultz realize that he had stumbled across something remarkable. Something the world will love to get their hands on. Good coffee. Schultz made the decision. he planned to leave his VP post for any place in Starbucks. He had a vision to change Starbucks to a brand that not only sold coffee beans, but the idea of a perfect cup of coffee, which was nothing short of heaven. This idea was one that didn't sit well with the founders, pushing away his chance to ever be part of Starbucks. 1982, a year later, and Schultz, very stubborn and persistent, managed to wear down Baldwin's decision. He was made director of sales and marketing, finally a part of the Starbucks family. But under one condition: they continued to be a retail store that sold coffee beans and equipment. The following year, the founders sent their director to a trade show in Milan, Italy, a trip that forever would change the course of Starbucks. Schultz passes by a little coffee shop and decides to pay a visit. As he enters, he's greeted by an enticing aroma. The barista behind the counter presses down on a metal press and pours an espresso for a customer. He then continues to make various types of coffee, all the while chatting with his customers. To Schultz, it's great theater. During his trip, he notices the abundance of espresso bars all packed with customers. Inside the shops, the customers sit around small white tables. Some are talking away, gesturing dramatically. Others seated alone are engrossed in a book or a newspaper. Still, others stand at the counter chatting with the other customers as they waited for their orders. When he reached the counter, his conversation with the barista sparked an idea. The barista talked about how every American that came through loves their espresso, stating there's nothing like this back home. The passion of Italians for coffee had reached Americans that traveled, and it was time for the rest of the nation to experience it too. Schultz wanted to open espresso bars in the United States. Back in Seattle, Schultz was determined to fulfill his wish. He persisted consistently after Baldwin, day after day, trying to convince him that this was the future of Starbucks. Baldwin finally caved. He gave Schultz 300 square feet and an espresso machine. Schultz was overjoyed. He took the opportunity and opened an espresso counter on a cool winter day. By its end, they had served an amazing 400 customers. And that wasn't the end of it. Each day, sales grew, quickly reaching over 800 customers per day. Schultz was ecstatic, but this wasn't enough to convince Baldwin. By the time 1985 came around, Schultz decided to give up and pursue the future of coffee over Starbucks and founded Il Giornale. His vision of bringing a little piece of Italy was brought to life with round tables and wooden floors married perfectly with Starbucks coffee beans. Il Giornale did great. It soon became the third place for people in between their work and homes, just like how Schultz envisioned. Even with all this success, Schultz couldn't forget Starbucks. Something about the green siren yet called out to him. And as fate would have it, in 1987, Baldwin called with an offer to sell Starbucks for $3.8 million, with a 90-day head start to gather the money. That's a lot of money for Schultz. But the prospect of owning Starbucks set his brain on fire. He convinces investors that the espresso concept will take off, and 2 months later, he raised $2 million. He was super confident that he'll be able to raise the rest soon. After a conflicting conflict with one of his investors, he finally acquired Starbucks by August 1987. Finally, with Starbucks in his grasp, Schultz takes a huge step. With more than 150 stores, the company has not only become the nation's largest specialty coffee roaster and retailer with huge potential to expand, but also the first coffee company to offer stock to the public. Fast forward to 5 years after Schultz bought the company, it now stands at a market valuation of $273 million. By the close of 1993, Starbucks had more than 270 stores in the Pacific Northwest. Schultz is now focused on competitors in the rapidly expanding gourmet coffee area, places like Barney and the Coffee Beanery that are after the same elite-tasting Java drinker. And now it's time to expand into the coffee kingdom on the East Coast. In April 1994, the company opened its first store in Boston. Schultz, the genius that he is, decided to introduce a new product idea, the Frappuccino. The first two flavors, coffee and mocha, are realized in the summer of 1995. In the first 2 weeks, a whopping 1 million are sold. That summer, Frappuccino accounts for 11% of Starbucks sales. As Starbucks' popularity increased, its competitors grew weary of their rapid growth without doing so much as advertising. Schultz was convinced that the best advertising is word of mouth from satisfied customers. With the 2008 recession looming over the companies, Starbucks has failed to meet its expansion criteria. Every new store has to bring in $2 for every dollar invested to cover costs. People were less reluctant to buy a $4 cup of coffee with money so tight, which led to the closure of 600 stores, which was about 8% of the expansion. Schultz decided that the best way to bounce back from this would be through advertising, and so plans for their first ever advert was made. On October 31st, 5 days before the election day between Barack Obama and John McCain, the advert was released. It's strange and unusual, just light piano music and green type rolling on a screen. The ad goes viral. It's seen by 89 million people both on TV and online. As the day comes, and Starbucks is filled. But the victory is only short-lived. They were sued for exchanging votes for something free in return, making them offer free coffee for anyone that asks. These weren't their only problems. Soon people realized that instead of buying coffee every day, there was an easy solution: make coffee at home. Starbucks, already struggling to gain traction with the recession, had to find a way to tackle two birds with one stone. That's when Schultz decided to launch instant coffee and make that a billion-dollar business, something that had already proved successful in the UK, taking over 80% of all coffee sales. All Schultz had to do was replicate that success with North America, with Starbucks' very own instant coffee. Their competitors were not too happy with their decision, and days before the product release, an article was published. "No, Starbucks, please don't," describing how the moves were nonsensical, that instant coffee is a terrible business, ending with, "Howard, are you feeling all right?" But that doesn't stop Schultz. He releases their instant coffee in 2009 called Via. It took the market by storm. It's instantly clear that customers love the convenience and the taste. In its first year, Via became the 5th best-selling brand in instant coffee, and sales increased substantially with each passing year. And Schultz didn't stop there. Starbucks tackled their menu, adding breakfast pairings. Breakfast items that come with 12-ounce tall coffee for $3.95. Now that's a bargain. However, this move was not a complete success. There was a lot of competition in the breakfast field, and Starbucks still proved to be more expensive than what the general public wanted to spend on their breakfast every morning. Starbucks feels the heat to remain the premium brand and retain those price-sensitive customers. Schultz comes up with a solution. They cut prices on popular items like lattes by 5 to 15 cents, but raise prices on specialty drinks like Frappuccino by 30 cents. In 2015, the R&D team came up with a new drink, cold brew, coffee that is left to break in cold water for 20 hours, better than iced coffee, and of course, more expensive. The drink quickly becomes popular as soon as it's released. To stay ahead of the copycats, Starbucks releases a second drink, Nitro Cold Brew, a cold brew influenced with nitrogen, which gives the naturally sweet drink an impressive foamy top. Both these drinks were a huge success, and their sales continued to grow during the following years. But things didn't stay smooth sailing for long. In 2018, 2 African-American gentlemen were arrested for sitting at a Philadelphia Starbucks without ordering anything. The action was not taken lightly by the public, resulting in week-long protests. Schultz had to take matters into his own hands. He issued for mandatory training of all staff members on racial bias training, a move that would cost them millions of dollars in sales, but a much-needed one to help with its future. While their reputation took a hit, they still continued to count small victories. Business Insider's Jessica Tyler, who tried Starbucks cold brew, states Starbucks had a nicer atmosphere to spend in and better coffee for less money. Starbucks now was going to make its move in the breakfast industry. The breakfast business consists of locking down their customers as best as they could, because once people make their breakfast choice, they don't change it very often. Starbucks decided that home delivery was what was missing from their otherwise perfect customer service, partnering with Uber Eats so customers can get coffee and a breakfast sandwich delivered without ever getting out of their PJs. In 2019, Starbucks took in more than $26 billion in revenue. But not besides Dunkin, other competitors are also waking up to the call of superior coffee, including McDonald's, Burger King, 7-Eleven, and much more. With such heated competition, get ready for high-velocity innovation. But the real challenge to Starbucks may not be overcoming recessions or beating their competitors. Climate change, which will bring droughts and deforestation, and that will decimate coffee bean production, is definitely their biggest enemy. About half the land around the world used to cultivate high-quality coffee could fail by 2050. 60% of wild coffee species are under threat of extinction, including the Arabica beans used by Starbucks will probably die. And there you have it. This is how Starbucks went from being a small retailer who sold coffee beans to the giant it is today. I would love to hear from you. Do you love Starbucks too? What's your favorite drink? Let us know in the comments below. That's all for today's episode on the inception of Starbucks. Don't forget to subscribe for more. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. It does wonders for the YouTube algorithm, so more people can see our videos and so that you can be notified when we launch our next video. We try and put out at least one new one per week, and as you can imagine, the research and editing alone of these type of videos takes us close to 18 hours. So we would really appreciate it if you could also check out our Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can support our work. We produce over 12 videos per month, so that is literally 8 cents per video. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at our next unmasking.